Thank you so much, Jarek, for joining me today on behalf of Smith, Scott, Mullan and Associates. This is a fantastic new office that you have, very funky, very creative for architects.
Proud of it.
Yeah, no, it's a really fantastic location as well, Rutland Square, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So really, really good space. But today I'm going to focus on your research and development tax journey as architects. I want to talk a wee bit about your experience of claiming. We'll focus on what benefit it's made to the company, what sort of projects that have qualified for you, and really it's just to share your insight and your opinions on the legislation. So first questions first, I have a few here to go through.
Brilliant.
Before we met, we've been working now 3 years together, but before we met, what was your opinion of when you heard research and development tax relief?
That is a very good question. I didn't really have much opinion about this because I simply didn't know much about this.
Okay.
And I think that is probably shared opinion within the office, that we've heard something somewhere, but no details really. So that came with an element of unknown, I guess. So, and maybe that was the reason why we didn't really try to pursue it earlier than we did. And then also maybe we were not convinced that what we do is innovative enough to be eligible, until the point we realized it actually is to some extent. So, and that kind of opened the door to explore the subject further. Yeah.
Perfect. And actually, I'm sure that I was introduced to yourself and Eugene through a third party. So that just kind of shows the power of collaboration,
That's correct.
Now, I'm completely aware that in the architect and design space, there's many ways that you can make an R&D claim. You can do it yourself if you're completely comfortable. You can go through your accountant if that's an area that they specialise in. Or, like you have chosen, you can go through a specialist. So again, just a wee bit on your perspective on why you chose to go through a specialist instead of the other ways.
I think that is quite simple. We tend to work with specialists.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
And we want specialist advice and we want comfort of working with specialists. And there is no difference when it comes to tax, I suspect. So we know that we are not great in it, or this is not our field of expertise, so it seems natural to kind of give away this portion of our responsibility to someone who knows exactly the drill. And it comes with obviously certainty, which was quite important for us, I guess. We don't really fully understand this legislation. We don't really know where the traps are, and specialists would know those. And I suspect even the writing a report, it could be a piece of science for us. We would have to learn it from scratch, while there is already someone out there who can do it. So it's pretty much like employing a sub-consultant almost to do their job, really.
Perfect.
Quite simple like as that. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's exactly right. And certainly from working in the architect and the design space, I tend to find that this particular field struggles to understand the difference between a normal problem and an R&D problem. So it's just useful to have that expert come in and sort of highlight, okay, this would be business as usual, this would be standard practice, these are things you've done 10 times over, but these are areas where you struggle with or where you're uncertain on how to advance. So has that helped having that guide?
I think that is a huge difference. I think we probably would waste quite a lot of time if we followed what we felt R&D is. And as a result, we simply save that time and we focus on what is actually appropriate for this type of tax relief. So definitely there is efficiency in this, yes.
Absolutely. And I've certainly sat with your consultations when you've went through the process, and I have been there when you've talked about certain subjects or projects and CASACs have said, nope, we're not going to put that in. It's not going to be strong enough. It's not robust enough. Let's focus on the flagship example. And again, that's just relating to the education part you said about being led and using the specialist for that exactly.
Yes, that definitely did. It was a smooth process, and it allowed us to to go through it in an efficient way. And obviously we all struggle with time. There is never enough of it. So we don't want to walk into kind of dead ends only to realize that the time has been wasted and we have to redo the process again, or maybe we are exposing ourselves to a risk of overclaiming, which we obviously that would not be a good position to be in. So again, this advice on what is the current legislation, what is the current understanding of R&D, it just keeps the process streamlined and quick. And it's not that it's very quick, it still takes an effort to do it. It's not free money, but it's definitely worth it. Yes.
For sure. And actually, that's a really good point. But you're talking about the process and what's involved time-wise from yourself and effort. So again, do you feel like there's maybe a misconception in the industry that this is going to take so much effort, so much of your time, it's just not worth it? What would you feel the industry thinks about this subject?
Yeah, you're probably right here, and there's obviously this perception of an element of risk that if we spend all that time and there is nothing out of it, therefore why would we? It might be also the case, and depending on different practices, as how innovative and adventurous they are, and it might be, for some it will be easier than for others, of course, and our goal, we are not shy of adventurous and maybe more difficult projects, and that wasn't too difficult for us to identify those areas where the innovations and research is happening, basically.
Super. Well, that actually leads me on really nicely to my next question, which is about your projects. So of course, there's a lot that you guys get up to, very, very creative, very advanced. And then there's some business as usual things that keeps the money coming in, keeps the lights on. So could you maybe, for other architects that might be watching this, could you highlight some areas where you've seen R&D activities, you explored R&D activities, etc.?
Yes, so maybe keeping the long story short, because I could talk about this for hours probably. We are at the point where the building industry is changing. The transition is obviously ongoing. We have to achieve net zero by 2030 pretty much. So there is loads that has to change. And this is what we have to research and develop, really. So anything that has anything to do with more sustainable solutions, more something that helps us to get to that net zero goal would be on that list. And obviously the target is a moving target. So for example, passive house, which is a big thing for us, some years ago all of it would be innovation, at least in the Scottish context, but currently some of it is already business as usual. And there are elements of it that are still maybe to be explored and researched, and there is some more innovative element to it. But some aspects of it are already becoming business as usual.
Correct.
And this is very interesting to see how it progresses. So, but yes, passive house, definitely aspects of passive house, elements of enerfit or maybe retrofit and energy efficiency improvements to existing buildings. And again, it's recognizing what is already business as usual that we would have been doing for years, but it's difficult. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily research or something that we completely explore, a completely new area, new materials, or using different materials from one kind of part of the industry, trying to adopt them in different part of industry, or from domestic scale to big non-domestic scale and so on. So trying to understand what is business as usual and trying to change what's already there, pretty much. That's I believe that's the point of it.
I mean, that is a stupendous answer. You've taken all of my words. But no, just to reiterate, you are exactly right. In your line of work, there will be practices and methods and protocols that you are fully aware of, and you know how to implement them. And it might take a bit longer, or it might be a bit expensive, but they work. And you know they will work because you've tried and tested it before. And that might, allure to the passive house example. But I think what maybe you were highlighting was, yes, building a residential house to passive house, that's completely doable. Many practices are capable of doing it. However, maybe taking the passive house method and applying it to a semi-residential, semi-commercial building, is that the same philosophy you would follow? Is it the same tools you would use? Is it the same process you would go through? Probably not. So there will be natural uncertainties that you face in regards to, well, we haven't pushed the building that far before. Well, we need to make sure that it performs in the way that the client needs it to perform, and we haven't done that yet. And the know-how and the capability in the market are limited. So we have to innovate. We have to think outside the box. We need to fulfill this client's brief. So this is where all the R&D comes for yourselves.
That is definitely true, and I suspect that when it comes to all this net zero, let's use this word, although it's not necessarily the correct definition, but for simplicity, this journey to net zero is a little bit of a pioneering ground. There is lots to discover. We don't know lots of things yet, so it's an interesting and very exciting area, but also it carries risks. As in any form of pioneering, there are risks.
Of course.
And I suspect maybe having a little bit of help in tackling those risks facilitates that. It allows us to maybe take some more risks a little bit sometimes, and be a bit more adventurous and innovative than we normally would without this extra money.
So would it be fair to say that with having the R&D incentive there, even though it's not the driving force to these projects and it's not the full objective of why you're doing it, would it be fair to say that it's a nice bonus?
Oh, it's definitely a nice bonus, and it probably would be fair to say that quite a lot of innovation wouldn't have happened without, because obviously architecture is working on quite tight margins, and we don't have awful lot of money to spend, so it just allows certain things to happen. So definitely there's importance of this on this journey to net zero. This is at least how it looks from kind of maybe our perspective and how our company is using it.
It's a really, really good insight again, Jarek. So I suppose a follow-on question would be, what would your advice be to other practices that are out there and they've heard of this initiative, they've maybe been a bit nervous about it? What would you say to them to get them, or to give them a bit of reassurance of your experience?
Couple of things. I think what worked quite well for us was that we had a couple of individuals in the company that were kind of core to the process, and they had maybe better understanding of it than others. And then those individuals were able to, through the knowledge of other projects, were able to identify where potential R&D is. And then other project architects would be asked to help in the context of that particular project only. So that was quite a light process for most of people in the company. We didn't try to make everyone engage. It was quite well defined. And
so you almost picked the technical heads and said, what's your knowledge of this initiative? Where do you find we face most of the uncertainties, and sort of took their knowledge on, well, here's what they would consider business as usual, and here's where we push the boundaries.
Yes, but it was led by two individuals, so as a result, members of the office hardly even knew about the process, which is the time-saving element to it, obviously, because this is what we're trying to achieve here. So that's the one thing. What else? Just go for it.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. It's definitely something that helps. I guess it's good to have a conversation with the accountant as well, and make sure that that is understood, because that is almost like a third actor in this process. Architects is one, accountancy is the second, and then you guys is a third, and that has to be basically coordinated. But this is what we do, architects, so that shouldn't be too difficult. Coordinating.
Of course. And it's funny because I met with an accountant actually earlier on today, and one of the things that they find is that their clients expect them to know everything. So a client would go to an accountant and say, can I do this? Can I do that? What's your knowledge on this X, Y, Z? And they say, listen, hands up. Either we can do this and we've got an in-house team and we're specialised in it, or I'm going to put you on to a trusted advisor of ours. Because they just, a lot of accountants, you know, they can't be proficient across every avenue of tax. Yep. But you are right. First port of call, you know, talk to your accountant, find out, you know, what their level of knowledge is in that space. And personally, from my experience, I have found that again with architecture and design, it's a nervous sector, particularly when it comes to understanding R&D. So I've definitely found that the collaboration element of talk to your accountant, but also talk to a specialist and get them to collaborate.
Yes, exactly. You
know, they can bring their expertise together, and between the two of them, you know, it can be an education game, because, you know, an accountant's role, part of it is to maximise their client experience. So if they can become a bit more savvy with the, you know, the R&D changes or the initiative, then that's just got to help everyone, really.
Definitely. I guess another thing when it comes to process is just having a good record of working times helps. And I would imagine that most of companies have a good record, but it was definitely something that the software we are using that allows us to give the quick data about who was working on what project, in what time, on what aspect of it, definitely help us to cut this portion of computing of hours, basically.
Yeah, I can imagine that though, because the very first time anybody goes through an R&D claim, of course it's overwhelming. Of course they don't know exactly what cost categories to look at, or they'll be confused about what qualifies and what doesn't. But it sounds like after you go through it the first time, it almost shifts gear internally, and it helps you work a bit more efficiently for the next year's claim. Because then you go, right, well now we know, let's categorise this here, let's put a note there, and when it comes round to your consultation, you have it all there to go, right, let's talk about it.
It's definitely, it definitely gets easier, yes.
Yeah, of course. What is your take on the subject of research and development throughout the architect industry? Is it talked about enough? Is it advertised or discussed enough?
Yes, to be honest, I don't think so. I think it almost feels, because it's a conversation about money, so it almost feels secretive, if that makes sense.
I've heard that.
Yes, it's not exactly openly talked of. I'm sure loads of companies do that, but I was not a witness of many conversations about this. So definitely more CPD about R&D tax relief would help with accessibility to this. And it's maybe the question who the CPD is targeted to. Not everyone in the company has to know about this, or maybe have an idea, but not to the nitty-gritty detail of it. But it definitely would help, and would, you know, again, thinking of this transition to net zero, that would help the transition to net zero for the whole industry. And I would like to think that at some point maybe contractors will see it this way too.
All supply chains, absolutely, yes. Everyone that you work with. No, it's a good point, because I always feel like if there's a topic that you want to learn more about, but you're reading HMRC website, it can become quite daunting, it can become overwhelming, you can get a bit scared about all the jargon. But to have it be a common topic within your industry, then that's the perfect way to learn about it on your own time. You can, you know, see what other companies have done and their experience, just like we're doing today. No, I think it's a really good thing to encourage within the industry. So I hope there's more going to be coming out about it. So Jarek, we've talked quite a bit about sustainability and passive house, which is fantastic. And yes, there's R&D all over these topics. But again, for a bit of clarity on other things you're involved in that touch the R&D spot, and certainly I imagine other architects will be in this space. Is there anything you can share with us on that area?
Yes, there is few interesting ones that we deal with. So again, it's pretty much about what we bring into the industry. What is the new approach that potentially makes industry better or more efficient? So it could be very much any area, to be honest. So there is an element of, for example, dealing with fire, and it's obviously a big subject, and maybe some more efficient or more successful methods of doing this. Also some new building techniques, perhaps. We're looking at MMC1, the modern methods of construction, modular housing, CLT, mass timber. All of those things are not really fully developed yet as an industry in Scotland, or are, but in some limited scale in some cases. So this is the whole kind of area for R&D, for growth, for developing the knowledge and so on. Also some unique projects that are very specialized, and they might move the knowledge of the industry to somehow. We're dealing with fossils, for example. We're dealing with very interesting arrangement when it comes to plants for botanics, for the Royal Botanic Garden and so on.
Yep.
So these are very, very specific projects that require very specific knowledge that has to be created pretty much for this project, and then can be reused on other also very specific projects. So there is a number of areas that can be explored. Really, it's not just sustainability.
And at the end of the day, whatever subject it is that you're working in, or whatever field you're trying to advance, what you're really doing is you're pushing the know-how or the capability at that time. Because your industry has limitations, it has restrictions, and although there are products and materials that exist and you can use them in your project, it doesn't mean you're using them in the way they were intended to be used. It may be that you're pushing the capabilities of how these products were supposed to be used, or it may be that you've found a new advancement to using it in a different way, and actually that's enhanced the performance of the building. And of course, that's not just going to come like that. You have to go through tests, you have to go through trials, you have to understand what the knock-on effect is, the domino effect of if you change this part, how does that impact that? So yeah, you are right. We could talk for hours on all the different angles of research and development, but no, that was really helpful just to give an insight into it really can vary, and it's best to explore this conversation more.
Absolutely. I think maybe the final point to it would be we have to forget about the term we've always done it this way. That is not suitable anymore. Simply, the world is changing, the industry is changing, so now we have to think how to do it differently, and this is pretty much what we're doing here.
Absolutely. And I can imagine that clients come to you guys with briefs all the time. They want things bigger, better, shinier, fancier, but their budget is maybe this size. So again, you can't just take one thing, one concept that worked for this project and apply it to that. You have to constantly be thinking outside the box, trying to understand, well, how can we do this for the client on a shoestring budget? So even from a budget perspective, that may not be something that, it's not the budget that you're doing the R&D on, it's the behind the scenes processes to meet that budget. That's where the innovation comes. And
some R&D is actually finding the solutions that fit the budgets in the first place, because otherwise the project would struggle. So that's also an important thing. There is lots of solutions for lots of problems out there, but we have to find the ones that are efficient and cost efficient as well.
Absolutely. So today, Jarek, it's been really, really insightful for the viewers. I think what we've covered is you use a specialist for your R&D claims. They help you keep on the right lines. By doing these claims, you've improved the practice, you've helped them be more adventurous with their projects moving forward. And at the end of the day, everyone's a winner, really.
That is very true.
All we want is just more talking about it in the industry.
That's correct, yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and some really great insights to R&D in the architect space.
Thank you very much.